Hello everyone, and welcome back to Quantum Storytime on Yellow Brick Road Rash. If you're new here, I want to extend a heartfelt welcome to you as well. Do me a favor, if you are new here, go back to the very first post on the channel. It's my trailer. From there you can launch into this journey with all of the foundational information you will need to understand each and every episode moving forward. Like in a chapter book, I have renamed my episodes to reflect the sequential nature of this story by calling them chapters. The topics will seem to be divergent on the surface, but they're fundamentally interwoven, so approaching everything in order is essential to your understanding. All that being said, my last 3 chapters, this one and I think the last 2, are dedicated to anyone struggling with despair and confusion over loss of community here at the end of 2024. These are uncertain times, and that calls for sensitive measures, not desperate. We all could use a seed of hope to encourage us to trust that we will be okay. These chapters take us on a short detour away from the main path, but after this week, we will merge with that enduring yellow brick road once again. Then we will be on our way. I gotta say, concluding this segment has been hard. They are all hard. Mainly though because my heart's lightened since the last time I wrote. I feel a sense of release around the anxiety I had been feeling because this topic and its unique perspective just feels so right. The bottom line is the only person you can work on is yourself. Ever. Also, in the last few years, I have immersed myself in a variety of creative acts that I allowed to consume me, and in doing so, had the opportunity to feel flow like never before. I gotta admit, it caught me off guard, but having been in that zone, I absolutely get what author Paul Levy said about creating being at the heart of how to fix our world. I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again. Find your flow. That is where the miracles happen. Then share your creations and then teach others how to be in flow. It will change your life. In that vein, I'm going to consider putting a couple of one-day courses together to teach creative processes that will allow you to let go and be in a place of awe. If this is something that would interest you, reach out to me by either commenting here or on one of my social media accounts. And better yet, join my Patreon at the $5 level and above, and I will offer you a discount on the course equal to the cost of 1 month of your Patreon membership, whatever level you choose. These will likely be remote courses, so I have to figure out what I'm doing to pull it off, but I believe in the power of this. I will keep you posted through my videos here, so follow so you don't miss out. And join Patreon at patreon.com/IARTHAUS. This account gives our members the ability to support our work as a whole. Okay, now let's begin. In this chapter, we are going to expound on what could be the negative societal effects of Wetiko if we don't take stock and look inside ourselves for the issues and traumas being projected out into our world. Part 1. Patterns. I've always been struck by my ability to recognize patterns, whether it's faces, connections, or the intricate web of things that seem unrelated at first glance. Maybe it's just how my brain works, or maybe this whole exploration of patterns is a rabbit I was born to chase. Either way, the deeper I go, the more I see patterns everywhere, recurring at every level of existence, from the micro to the macro. And I don't believe that's by accident. Sorry for my throat and my voice, y'all. I'm still healing. We've already touched on interference patterns, vibrations happening at the subquantum level, forming the underlying fabric of existence. But what's even more profound is that we're not just surrounded by patterns, we are patterns. We perceive the world as patterns. We process information as patterns. We create patterns, all while being immersed in an infinite field of them. And then there are fractals, patterns within patterns, and it infinitely emerging and unfolding. Some believe the entire universe is fractal in nature, with every part of existence reflecting a larger whole. The laws governing everything, from the vast expanse of space to the tiniest particles, might one day reveal that it all stems from a singular source. Fractals are mesmerizing to watch unfold, as if you're witnessing the implicate order unfurl into the explicate world, a concept we've explored before. It's the idea that the smallest, seemingly insignificant things in the universe are constantly unfolding into the grandest. Is it really just a coincidence that the human eye looks strikingly similar to the Helix Nebula, also called the Eye of God? Speaking of patterns, I've often wondered, what's the difference between synchronicities, coincidences, and déjà vus? I've heard it said that coincidences are synchronicities that don't carry any meaning or weight. For instance, say you go to a party and the hostess has the exact same vintage napkins as you do. That's a coincidence. But if those napkins were a unique family heirloom passed down to you from your great grandmother, and you suddenly see an identical set, it's a synchronicity. It feels weighted with meaning. The difference lies in context, but both reveal repeating patterns. These are often tied to something visible, a material object, a symbol, yet layered with implied meaning. Déjà vu, though, is something else. It's an intangible kind of pattern recognition, something we feel without any clear symbol or event triggering it. It's that overwhelming sense of having been in the exact same place or situation before, without being able to pinpoint how or why. To me, déjà vu is a glimpse of a deeper, non physical pattern, something that exists beyond our visible perception, hinting at the unseen essence of reality. I often connect déjà vu to my dream life. I am a vivid dreamer, as I've said before, and déjà vu feels like a bridge between the waking life and the dream world, a fleeting sense of familiarity that eludes concrete definition. It's always about the essence, not the specifics. And then there's sound, another layer of unseen patterning. Sound is vibration, but it exists in a realm we cannot see. Think of the lingering resonance of a piano note. It hangs in the air, felt but invisible. Could déjà vu be like that? A faint, almost inaudible echo of a pattern we can't fully perceive? Maybe it's the vibrational residue of something we've experienced before but can't place. Fascinating, isn't it? We are creatures of pattern recognition, living in a universe built on patterns. But what about the ones you can't sense? Patterns beyond our survival driven perception. If they are not vital to staying alive, does that mean they're irrelevant? Or could it be the opposite, that understanding them is essential to our evolution? Quantum physics is beginning to uncover these hidden realities, and I believe exploring them is not just important, it's transformative and necessary. It forces us to expand beyond what our senses tell us is real. That expansion can be uncomfortable, even scary. But if consciousness truly drives existence, it's a step we have to take. There's wonder in this exploration and awe, but there's also humility. Sometimes it feels like walking on uneven cobblestones in ruby slippers. Science is catching up to what mystics have always intuited. Patterns are everywhere, connecting the macro and the micro, the visible and the invisible, the audible and inaudible. Eventually, I believe we'll uncover how it all links back to one singular source. But that's our task, to explore, to learn, to solve the riddles of existence. Speaking of riddles, I recently heard someone refer to Plato's cave as a riddle, which struck me as fitting. Great stories, like riddles, challenge us to look beyond the surface to decode their deeper meaning. Life itself, I think, is a riddle, a complex, ever shifting pattern of clues guiding us through the maze. But the answers aren't handed to us, we have to find them ourselves. This brings me to a book I recently finished called Application of Impossible Things. It tells the story of a civilian who survived an IED explosion in Iraq, experiencing both a near death and out of body experience. In vivid detail, she describes being transported to what she calls the blink environment upon her death, a kind of ethereal space filled with angelic beings who guided her back to life. One concept from the book struck me deeply: the idea that our lives have purpose, but that purpose is laid out as a loose plan before we're born. Within that plan or pattern, we have choices to make, decisions that shape our path and bring us closer to fulfilling it. It feels to me like a primordial riddle, one that takes a lifetime to solve but provides us with a sense of purpose. And where does that purpose come from? That's the ultimate question. What drives us uniquely forward? I can't help but think of our psyche, our daimon, that inner guide that nudges us forward toward what feels like flow. Without our unique problems to solve, our unique passions to follow, how would we know which way to go? Which brings me back to Dorothy. Her journey reflects the same pattern underlying Plato's cave. It's a riddle for her. She leaves Kansas, her cave, and steps into a vibrant, wondrous world she never knew existed. At first, it's foreign and frightening, but she learns to navigate it, discovering that life is far richer and more expansive than she'd ever imagined. Yet when she returns home, she finds no one believes her. I do discuss the allegory of the cave in an earlier episode. Like all great riddles, Dorothy's journey has many interpretations. Each is an attempt to decode its deeper meaning, and none are definitive. The beauty lies in the questions it raises, not the answers. So let me leave you with a riddle. I know the way, but cannot show, for you must grow before you go. Though I hold the key to your return, you must first learn what you must earn. What am I? Put your answer in the comments. This riddle reflects an important truth. While Glinda knows how to send Dorothy home, she withholds that knowledge until Dorothy has learned the lessons she needs. Without growth, Dorothy would have simply returned to Kansas unchanged, a missed opportunity for transformation. So don't listen to those other memes saying Glinda's the bad guy. On a related note, Graham Hancock offers an intriguing perspective on humanity's relationship with riddles. He hypothesizes that the pyramids of Giza are part of a grand enigma, designed to reveal their secrets only when humanity reaches a higher level of consciousness. Hancock suggests that the architectural anomalies embedded within the pyramids carry profound meaning that we are not yet evolved enough to fully understand or comprehend. His work paints a fascinating picture of a potential human prehistory rich with forgotten knowledge, one we will explore in greater depth in a future episode. For now, though, the pyramids serve as a reminder that riddles are intrinsic to human nature. We are problem solvers, constantly called to decode mysteries as part of our evolution. The next section is called The Riddler Called Wetiko. Returning to archetypes, Carl Jung described them as recurring patterns of behavior that operate like invisible blueprints for human perception. These information fields of influence act as unconscious stage managers, orchestrating the roles we play in life in the background. Archetypes are neither inherently good nor bad. Their impact deepens on how consciously we engage with them. When we remain unaware of their influence, archetypes can possess us, compelling us to act out their scripts without question. This possession halts our personal development, reducing us to tools of the collective unconscious. However, if we become aware of an archetype's influence, we can mediate it and even transform its energy, much like recognizing Wetiko can neutralize its hold over us. In the previous episode, we examined Wetiko on a personal level as an adversary to the psyche. Now, we turn to its collective manifestation, how it spreads like a cancer through society, infiltrating institutions and metastasizing into structures that govern our lives. Paul Levy describes this as a crisis of sanity, a moment in human evolution where we must choose whether to awaken or continue down a path of self-destruction. Levy states, "Our madness does not exist in a void. We were born into involuntary servitude to interlocking institutions created by unconscious, asleep humans. These systems, which began with good intentions, have turned corrupt, mandating us to live in ways that oppose our natural resources and instincts. It's tempting to wallow in despair at the darkness we face. But Levy reminds us of an old French saying, 'The hour calls for optimism. We will save pessimism for better times.' He urges us to move beyond blame and instead take responsibility for the systems we've inherited and the future we are creating. He challenges us to right the wrongs without creating new injustices. It's a daunting but necessary task. Someone's got to do it. I would argue Generation Jones, my generation, may just have the appropriate amount of optimism needed to champion this cause. Do you agree? If you are Generation Jones, I would love for you to chime in the comments. What do you think? Kamala is Generation Jones, so is Obama. I can see optimistic qualities in both. Perhaps somewhere out in our population, there are Generation Jones leaders constellating to be future leaders. This brings us to an important historical perspective: the rise of industrialization and capitalism. When large factories emerged, they served a bigger purpose, creating abundance and synergy that propelled humanity forward. However, we are now choking on the chains of these outdated systems, outgrowing the very mechanisms that once sustained us. Yet we cling to them, paralyzed by fear of change from the comfort of familiarity. This is not unlike Plato's cave, where slaves resist the light of freedom because the shadows are all they have ever known. Think about that. Does this mean, though, we should abandon our current systems entirely? Not necessarily. It means recognizing that we do need to evolve beyond them. Imagine structures that serve all of humanity, not just the wealthiest few. The challenge lies in balancing progress with care, avoiding the mistakes that have led to today's disparities. But this I know, we will not go back. Levy draws a stark comparison between Wetiko and capitalism, pointing out how both drain resources from the whole system to feed a select few. He highlights the alarming statistic that, as of 2022, the wealthiest 8 individuals held more wealth than half of the global population. This concentration of wealth threatens to destabilize society, leading to social breakdown, violence, and even fascism. In essence, our current economic system has become a Wetiko economy, perpetuating greed and inequity under the guise of progress. Levy also emphasizes that Wetiko thrives on blindness, a collective inability to see the truth. This blindness is reinforced by societal rewards for conformity and the fear of stepping outside the status quo. We've been hoodwinked into believing lies because facing uncomfortable truths feels too painful. As Levy puts it, staying blind is more comfortable than seeing the truth. People would rather strengthen their bondage to the physical world than confront the lies they live by. To break free, we must see Wetiko for what it is, a distortion of our own collective psyche. This requires courage and a willingness to confront our own complicity and an understanding of our interconnectedness as well. As discussed in the holographic universe, we are not separate individuals, but parts of a greater whole. By recognizing this, we can begin to reclaim our creative power and channel it towards solutions that benefit all of us. Finally, Levy reminds us that Wetiko is not an external force, but a mirror of our own inner condition. It thrives in our dissociative state, where we project our inner blindness onto others, perpetuating division. To heal, we must acknowledge this reflection and open our hearts to the reality of our interconnectedness. Only by shining light on Wetiko's influence can we begin to dissolve it, both in ourselves and in the systems we've created. Here's a quick review on dissociation, and the best way to talk about it is by looking at multiple personality disorder again. In order to cope with trauma, a person dissociates and creates multiple personalities to help them deal with the overwhelming stress of trauma. Each personality is individual and distinct. In the context of Wetiko, I believe Levy is pointing to how we separate from self by identifying with Wetiko in order to cope with stress. Think of Wetiko as one potential personality type within the multiple personality spectrum. Instead of having multiple personalities, though, we are identifying with that one in the context of this story. Now let us return to the notion of the riddle. Humanity's task is not just to solve problems, but to see through illusions and transform them into wisdom. This is the ultimate challenge Wetiko presents within us. The opportunity to awaken, to evolve, and to remember who we truly are. We all need to solve our own riddle of Wetiko. Here we go. Riddle me this. I am the hunger that devours yet feeds, the shadow that grows from unhealed seeds. Born of desire, I mirror your face, binding the many in a ruthless race. I thrive where fear and greed entwine. Unseen, I turn your heart to mine. To end me, you must not destroy, but face the void without employ. Who am I? Again, put your answer in the comments. To break free, we must recognize its presence within ourselves, embrace awareness, and replace fear with unity, love, and conscious action. Sounds kind of woo, but it's something we can actually do. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. And I'll say it again. Earth's resources are being drained not to sustain life, but to create more efficient ways of ending it. Weapons of mass destruction, like an autoimmune disease, turn on us, destroying the very organism they're meant to protect. We've been conditioned to normalize cruelty, spending trillions on endless wars while millions die from preventable causes like starvation. But let's be clear. Defense against true threats like fascism is not the same as pathological addiction to war. The ruling elite exploit us, treating the world as their playground and innocent lives as disposable pawns in their game of greed. It's illogical to wage war to establish peace. That makes no sense. War reflects a moral failure, a lack of imagination. The easy path is to play the hierarchical game of who has the biggest guns, knowing full well it will lead to countless deaths, most of whom are uninvolved civilians. Proximity, not culpability, becomes their fatal crime. We funnel money into this endless cycle. Over half of U.S. discretionary spending supports the war machine. Yet a war on poverty is deemed too expensive. This shadows the ideology of separateness, the false belief in individualism over collective good. These upside down values devour us from within. War, acting as Wetiko, spreads like a virus, infecting our consciousness. It becomes a self justifying beast, a Frankenstein's monster. Its violence perpetuates itself, feeding on the collective unconscious and unresolved trauma of humanity. It's not just bombs we drop, it's a war on consciousness, a war on imagination. And without imagination, we become easier prey for manipulation by the elite, who profit from this endless destruction. War is both a failure and a hijacking of imagination. It uses our creative potential not to build, but to destroy. It is, in essence, a projection of our shadow, our unresolved internal battles. I want to take a minute and go back to archetypes. Let's look at the devil card in tarot. As Biddy Tarot explains, when the devil shows up in a tarot reading, see it as an opportunity to bring these negative influences into your conscious awareness. So you can then take action to free yourself from their hold. Sound familiar? This dark force, whether you call it Wetiko, the devil, or war, is not invincible, though. It can only take root in regions of low consciousness. By shining light into this darkness, we expose its lies, and the grip it holds on us begins to loosen. But war persists because it's profitable. For some, these elites amass weapons as part of a preparatory ritual, conjuring destruction as if possessed by the very archetypes they serve. War becomes a parasitic force that feeds on life itself, eroding the ethical immune system of humanity. This dynamic is fractal. It mirrors the malware of a computer, programs designed to replicate and spread, leaving destruction in their wake. But these leaders, these mouthpieces of war, are also pawns. Archetypes animate them, driving them to act out collective shadows. Carl Jung postulated that the psyche exists to counterbalance the negative aspects of archetypes. If we are possessed by Wetiko, or the archetype of war, or any other negative archetype, the battle begins within us. Before we can change the external world, we must face the war inside ourselves. This point is critical to my discussion here today. The psyche is not a simplex, it's a duplex, two parts. We are a battleground for opposites, light and dark, shadow and psyche, victim and perpetrator. War itself is a projection of these conflicts, a dissociative field of trauma playing out on the global stage. The generation of leaders today, formed by their own collective traumas, project unresolved pain outward, perpetuating cycles of destruction. Instead of healing, they continue to inflict this trauma on the world. I do think it is the calling for maybe Generation Jones as a cusp generation to step up to what is now their place in the context of history. Time for them to take the leadership positions in this off-kilter country, being run by a generation with maybe what we could call obsolete trauma. It just doesn't apply to the rest of us. Those are my own thoughts, my own words. But understanding this dynamic can bring compassion. If we can illuminate the shadows within ourselves and within others, we open the door to transformation. The war on terror, the war in Ukraine, the endless battles of history, these are not separate from the collective unconscious. They are its manifestations. War is an inflammation, a symptom of deeper disease. The question is, will we wake up before it's too late? The next section is about Eckhart Tolle's concept of the pain body. It resonates deeply here, a force that feeds on suffering and perpetuates itself through our identification with it. Wetiko operates on a similar parasitic principle, informing patterns of addiction far beyond substances. Whether it manifests in obsessive ideas, compulsive shopping, or the stories we cling to, it thrives on repetitive behaviors that ultimately harm us. Paul Levy describes Wetiko as an addiction shadow complex, entangling evil, shadow, and addiction into a self-amplifying feedback loop. It metastasizes by feeding on the healthy aspects of the individual, displacing the ego and installing itself as an insatiable puppet master. Once Wetiko takes hold, it colonizes the psyche, hacking the individual with a false identity that acts in opposition to their own well-being. This phenomenon isn't limited to personal struggles. Trauma, compulsion, and societal cycles of addiction reflect the same Wetiko pattern writ large. Trauma itself repeats through addiction relapse, a living embodiment of the shadow's grip. At its core is a misplaced spiritual thirst, a craving for wholeness or union with the divine that becomes distorted into an addiction to external substitutes. Whether through substances like alcohol, ironically referred to as spirits, or materialistic pursuits, the soul's genuine desire for transcendence is perverted into a toxic spiral. Only by recognizing this misalignment, often through a crisis or a rock bottom, can healing begin. Jungian thought provides the key. Integration of the shadow is not about annihilation, but acknowledgement. As long as the shadow remains unacknowledged, it exerts control from the unconscious, projecting itself outward onto others. This leads to scapegoating, a psychological mechanism for avoiding self-awareness by casting blame externally. Historically, this dynamic has driven the most heinous acts of violence, from witch hunts to industrialized genocide. Fascism, fueled by collective shadow projections, turns fear into a weaponized narrative where the other becomes the enemy. Leaders exploit this collective paranoia, manipulating shadow projections to maintain power, to perpetuate war, and reinforce a cycle of unconscious violence. Shadow projection also operates in subtler interpersonal ways. It distorts relationships, preventing true connection and perpetuating cycles of judgment and arrogance. The unintegrated shadow is quick to fixate on the perceived flaws of others, all the while blind to its own role in the dynamic. Healing remains elusive, as the shadow's power grows stronger with every denial. Yet, by facing the shadow and owning the split-off parts of ourselves, we take the first steps towards individuation, becoming whole. Jung emphasized that integrating the shadow is crucial for awakening. It stops us from projecting our darkness outward, allowing us to withdraw our projection and shoulder the collective burden with conscious awareness. The consequences of failing to confront the shadow are dire. Projecting it outward strengthens its influence, leading it to systemic madness and collective paranoia. History has shown that when we fail to see the shadow within, we risk becoming the very evil we seek to destroy. The shadow's true power lies in its ability to remain unseen, poisoning the collective unconscious and perpetuating cycles of violence, hatred, and division. Yet the shadow is also the gateway to profound transformation. By integrating it, we not only liberate ourselves, but also contribute to the collective healing of humanity. Paul Levy connects this to the dreamlike quantum nature of reality, where what we observe and participate in becomes reality itself. Wetiko, much like the shadow, exists as a multidimensional force, not limited to the physical world, but operating within the psyche and collective field. The cure, then, lies not in materialist solutions alone, but in spiritual awakening. We must see the virus, Wetiko, and our own shadow as part of a larger system that we are co-creating. This is not mere optimism, but an urgent call to action, to step out of despair and recognize our power as active participants in shaping the world. The possibility of global awakening, though daunting, is real. By bringing light to the shadow, we illuminate the path toward unity and transformation. As Jung reminds us, the process of individuation requires us to take up the shadow as our cross, to see ourselves fully, both divine and as human, is to reclaim our power and heal the split within. When we integrate the shadow, we stop unconsciously feeding the darkness and begin to dream a world aligned with wholeness and love. This is no easy task, but it is the work that our time demands. Only by coming together as co-creators can we break the recurring cycle of destruction and finally evolve. Catastrophe, after all, is also a turning point. The choice is ours. In the end, Dorothy's story reminds us that while the journey may feel external, the true transformation occurs within. The slippers, like our own latent power, are a reminder that the way forward is less about finding a destination and more about awakening to the light we carry all along. To trust this truth is to find our way home. Here's a couple of additional thoughts. As Dorothy continues her journey along the yellow brick road, the ruby slippers become more than just a tool for her return home. They symbolize the profound inner knowledge and power she must learn to trust. Her encounters with each companion, each adversary, and the slippers themselves reflect her growing realization that the answers and strength she seeks have always resided within her. Much like the archetypal fool in tarot, Dorothy's path is one of discovery, learning through experience, and ultimately claiming her sovereignty. This resonates deeply with the way we navigate our own journeys. Life often challenges us to uncover the wisdom of our intuition, symbolized by the slippers, even as the shadowy aspects of our psyche, like the Wicked Witch, try to divert us. It is through these trials and reflections that we come to recognize the daimonic presence, the inner guide, or Glinda, that gently but persistently pushes us toward authenticity and alignment. Well, that's all I have for you today, folks. I really appreciate you sticking with me through this episode. I kind of covered a lot, so thank you for being here. I wanted to add a couple of comments about my changed background and environment and just kind of unorganized looking situation. Our house is a tiny home and it is full of Christmas presents and decorations and everything right now. And basically, my studio has become a little storage area for all the things I don't have a place for otherwise. So I decided to approach this episode in a little more casual way. And I wanted to point out this amazing piece of artwork. I know it's kind of blurred out a little bit in the background, but this is by a friend of ours, Dan Blakesley. He lives up in the Maine area and he has an incredible portfolio of prints that he makes. And he's also a musician. So if you're in New Hampshire or Massachusetts or Maine up there, he does a lot of really great shows. So maybe try to go see him. Again, his name is Dan Blakesley. And if you're listening, Dan, we miss you. And we miss you too, Aaron. Love you. I guess that's it for today. I played around with having a little secret content at the end here, but I know y'all are all waiting for this episode to come out and I need to get started on editing. This may be the last one you'll see before Christmas because we're getting so close. But if I get an opportunity to film another one, another short one, maybe before then, I will. We're approaching the end of 2024, and I have to say, good riddance, 2024. I'm not sure what 2025 is going to bring, but we're never sure what the future will bring. I'm just going to choose to live in the moment and live in the power of now and work on myself and do what I can to raise my vibration so that I can help raise the vibration of the whole. Join me in that, would you? All right. Bye-bye. Happy holidays.